Last summer, my daughter cried herself to sleep covered in mosquito bites and running a fever, and I am telling you right now, that will change the way you look at your yard. Because in that moment, it stops being about summer annoyance. It stops being about a few itchy bumps and a little swatting at dusk. It turns into something else. It turns into that ugly feeling that your own backyard is working against you. Like you set the table, lit the grill, opened the back door, tried to give your family one good evening outside, and still got beat by something the size of a paperclip. What got me even more was what I realized after. The answer was not sitting in another spray can. It was not hiding in one more seasonal display of citronella buckets and mosquito gadgets. It was already growing in the kinds of plants people use every day and still somehow overlook. That is the shift I want to make in this video. Not just, here are 10 plants. Not just, here are some nice-smelling herbs. I mean a real shift, from reacting to mosquitoes to building a space that is simply harder for mosquitoes to use in the first place. And before we go any further, think about your own life for a second. Has a mosquito ever ruined something that actually mattered? A birthday dinner? A backyard barbecue? A quiet drink on the porch after work? Your kids finally playing outside without screens, only for everybody to rush back in, slapping their arms and ankles. That is what people are tired of. It is not only the bite, it is the way mosquitoes hijack the whole mood of a place that is supposed to belong to you. So in this first part, I want to stay close to the body, close to the chairs, close to the grill, close to the back door, close to the table where people actually sit. These are the plants that protect the first layer, the lived-in layer, and then in the next part, I am saving the cheap little plant that makes the whole DEET conversation look a lot less impressive. Let's start with the one that already feels familiar, the one most people already know from the kitchen but almost nobody thinks of as part of mosquito control: basil. Basil is one of those plants people underestimate because it feels too ordinary, too useful, too edible, too easy to dismiss. That is exactly why it is such a great first plant for this system. Because basil belongs where real life happens. Right on the patio table. Right next to the grill. Right by the back step where the screen door keeps opening and closing all evening. Basil is not one of those plants you tuck off in some forgotten bed and admire from a distance. Basil wants to be used, and that is what makes it powerful here. The more it is part of your routine, the more sense it makes in a mosquito defense setup. And basil is not just strong because it smells sharp and peppery. It is stronger than that. It works on 2 levels. The first level is obvious. Its scent is aggressive enough that mosquitoes do not enjoy hovering around it the way they do around still, stale, human-heavy air. The second level is where basil gets interesting. Basil has been studied for more than just repelling adult mosquitoes. It has also shown larvicidal value, which means it has real relevance in breaking the cycle before the next wave ever lifts off. That matters, because keeping mosquitoes from landing on you is one thing. Interrupting the breeding cycle is a whole different level of usefulness. And that is why basil is not just a kitchen herb in this conversation, it is one of the smartest plants in the whole first layer. And not all basil earns that role equally. If you can get your hands on lemon basil or cinnamon basil, do it. Regular sweet basil still pulls its weight, no question. But lemon basil and cinnamon basil bring a stronger aromatic edge that makes them feel even more suited to this job. They smell brighter, sharper, more alive, and they turn an ordinary pot of basil into something that feels a lot more deliberate. So where do you put it? Not 20 feet away. Not in the vegetable patch where you only visit twice a week. Put it where people breathe. Put it where people eat. Put it where mosquitoes think they are about to have an easy evening. 1 pot by the back door, 1 near the table, 1 near the grill, and trim it. Keep it full. Keep it leafy. Pinch the tops. Use it in pasta, in pesto, on tomatoes, on grilled chicken, and whatever you are already cooking. Because every time you keep basil growing thick and active, you are feeding both parts of its job. The food side and the protection side. That is what I like about starting here. It teaches you the whole logic of this garden in one plant. Useful things can protect you too. Now if basil is about usefulness, the next plant is about something else as well. It is about actually enjoying the space you worked so hard to build. Lavender. Lavender changes the feel of a yard almost immediately. Basil says somebody cooks here. Lavender says somebody lives here on purpose. It brings beauty into the defense system, and that matters more than people think. Because the goal is not to make your patio feel like a military checkpoint. The goal is to make it feel calm, finished, welcoming, and a lot less enjoyable for mosquitoes at the same time. Lavender is one of the most loved plants in the world for a reason. People use it in oils, soaps, teas, candles, sleep blends, dried bundles, all of it. But what feels soothing to you does not feel soothing to a mosquito. To a mosquito, that aromatic cloud is the opposite of an invitation. And this is where placement really starts to matter. A mature lavender plant gives you about a 10-foot circle of protection in the way a good neighbor would explain it. Not lab language, real yard language. Close enough that you can picture what to do with it. One plant by itself helps, but several planted around where people actually sit start creating overlapping circles of protection. That is when the idea clicks. Now, you are not just adding a pretty herb, you are layering the air. You are building soft barriers. You are making the patio, the chairs, the path, the edge of the deck feel like a place mosquitoes have to work harder to enter. That is the image I want you to keep in your head. Not one heroic plant doing everything. Several smart plants, each claiming a little territory. Lavender is perfect for that because it wants those bright, hot, sunny spots anyway. Likes the places people often ignore until they need something beautiful there. Along the border of the patio, beside a chair, near the sunny side of a walkway, around the edge of the area where people talk and linger. And here is one of my favorite little practical things about it. Lavender gets more useful when it becomes part of movement. Brush past it and you wake it up. Touch it lightly and the oils rise. Plant it where your body naturally interacts with it and the whole thing starts feeling less like landscaping and more like a living system that responds to use. That is the kind of protection I like. Not loud, not plastic, not temporary, just there doing the work while the yard gets better looking at the same time. Still, sometimes you want something with a little more presence. Something bigger, something more symbolic. Oh, something that makes the whole store-bought ritual start looking a little silly. You know those citronella candles stacked everywhere the second warm weather hits? The buckets, the torches, the refill bottles, the whole seasonal parade of buy it, burn it, run out of it, buy it again. The industry loves that loop. You can smell the repeat purchase from the parking lot. But here is the part people miss. You can grow the source. Lemongrass. Lemongrass is one of the sharpest plants in this whole conversation because it exposes how weak a lot of the retail mosquito habit really is. People keep buying the softened, packaged version of an idea that they could be growing in a pot big enough to make an actual statement. And lemongrass does make a statement. It is tall. It is lush. It moves in the wind. It does not disappear into the background. It feels like a plant with a job. That is exactly why I like it at the edge of the first layer. By the corner of the deck, by the bright side of the patio, near the opening where the sitting area spills into the rest of the yard. It has enough size to start pushing the protection line a little wider, which is what you want before mosquitoes ever get right on top of you. And yes, one of the reasons people keep coming back to lemongrass is simple. It is packed with the same citronella logic the retail world has been selling back to people for years. Except here, it is alive. And here is the kind of direct, copy-it-today action that helps people actually use the plant. Crush a leaf or a stalk between your hands and rub that fresh oil right where mosquitoes usually go after you. Arms, ankles, calves. The little openings in your routine where bites always seem to find you first. That one tiny action makes people stop thinking of the plant as decoration and start treating it like a real tool. That matters. Because a lot of listeners need one small behavior they can imitate immediately. Not next month. Not after a full landscape plan. Tonight. And lemongrass gives them that. It also happens to be one of those plants that pulls double duty beautifully. You can use it in soup, curry, tea, marinades, all kinds of cooking. So now compare the value. One root gives you a seasonal candle that burns down and asks for another purchase. The other gives you a living plant that looks dramatic, helps push mosquitoes back, and can end up in dinner. That is not a hard decision. And if lemongrass helps guard the edge of the space, The next plant earns its place right in the middle of real life, right by the grill, right by the path, right where people are moving, cooking, laughing, carrying plates, and brushing past it without even thinking. Rosemary. Rosemary is what happens when a plant is already useful enough to deserve a spot, and then turns out to be even more valuable than people gave it credit for. It is tough. It is woody. It smells clean and resinous and a little sharp. It handles heat well. It does not act fragile. It is one of those plants that seems to respect people who have better things to do than fuss over it all day. That alone would earn it a place in plenty of yards. But rosemary carries more weight than that. It has been shown to work against Aedes aegypti, and that matters because now we are not only talking about nuisance mosquitoes buzzing your ankles while burgers are on the grill. We are talking about a species people know because of dengue and Zika. That gives rosemary a different seriousness, and yet it still fits into the yard in the most natural way possible. Because rosemary belongs near heat and motion, near the grill, where the whole evening is already gathering, near the doorway, where people pass by again and again, near the path, where your body brushes it and stirs up the scent. This is why rosemary feels so good in the first layer. It protects without interrupting life. It protects while life is happening. And there's a little trick here that people remember because it is so physical. Take a few rosemary sprigs and lay them near the grill, or let the heat catch the scent while you cook. The whole area changes. The air gets fuller. The space starts smelling like food, smoke, herbs, evening, people being outside on purpose. Mosquitoes do best in stale, untouched, neglected spaces. Rosemary helps create the opposite of that, and if we are being honest, it also makes you look like you know what you're doing. Not in a showy way, just in that quiet backyard way where people think, okay, this person has figured a few things out. And then, to close this first layer, I want something softer, not weaker, just gentler. Because the best family gardens do not all speak with the same voice. Lemon balm. Lemon balm is the plant a lot of people walk right past because it does not put on much of a performance. No dramatic structure, no big visual swagger, no look-at-me energy. But it is modest, which is exactly why it catches people off guard. Because lemon balm does a kind of quiet work that belongs beautifully in a family space. It carries that clean, lemony freshness mosquitoes do not enjoy, but it also carries something more human than that. It has a long reputation for calming the nervous system, easing stress, softening the edges of a restless evening. And that is one reason I wanted it here, specifically after the opening of this video. Because when you have had a child cry herself to sleep after getting torn up by bites, your relationship to the yard changes. You do not only want fewer mosquitoes, you want the whole atmosphere to feel gentler, safer, less edgy, less like everybody has to brace for the evening. Lemon balm helps with that mood. Yet it is one of those plants that makes the first layer feel complete, because protection is not only about driving something away. Sometimes it is also about what kind of feeling you are building in its place, and that is where lemon balm earns its keep. Put it in a container near a chair, near the back steps, near the quieter side of the patio where somebody sits with tea after dinner, or where a tired parent finally gets 5 minutes to breathe while the kids settle down inside. That is lemon balm territory. It also grows with a kind of cheerful confidence, so give it room, or keep it in a pot unless you want it getting ambitious. It is not destructive. It is just enthusiastic. Like a neighbor who came over to drop off tomatoes and somehow ended up helping reorganize your shed. And I like ending this first layer here for a reason. Basil gave us usefulness. Lavender gave us enjoyment. Lemongrass gave us reach. Rosemary gave us movement and heat and lived-in protection. Lemon balm gives us softness without giving up the point. That is a strong first layer. Now step back and really look at what we have built already. Not the whole system. Not yet. But the most important zone for a lot of people? Yes, the close zone, the table, the chairs, the grill, the back step, the few feet around your body where summer evenings either work or fall apart. And what I love about this stage is how doable it is. You do not need a giant property. You do not need a professional landscaper. You do not need to turn the whole yard into an herb monastery by Saturday afternoon. A few smart pots placed where life is already happening can change the feel of an evening faster than people expect. That is the kind of progress that keeps people going. Because once you sit outside and realize you are not swatting every 30 seconds, once the back door stops feeling like the entrance to a mosquito ambush, once the grill area starts feeling like your space again, you understand why this matters. But let me be clear, a few useful pots by the chairs is not the whole game. This is only the first layer. In the next part, we go wider. That is where I bring in the cheap little plant that makes a whole aisle of mosquito products look a lot less impressive. That is where we build the border, the perimeter, the outer pressure that turns this from a helpful setup into a real summer defense system. So subscribe, hit the bell, and come back for part 2 because that is where this garden starts locking into place.